A Marine sniper was humiliated by cops in court, treated as guilty before he even spoke. But just when things seemed lost, an elite general walked into the room, and with his presence, the scales of justice shifted in a way no one saw coming. The courtroom was hot, not from the weather but from the tension. Travis Cole sat in chains, his hands trembling slightly beneath the table. The orange jumpsuit did nothing to strip away his military bearing, yet in this moment he looked like a man stripped of everything: respect, dignity, and voice. On the other side of the room, two police officers leaned back in their chairs, smirking with folded arms. They hadn't just arrested him, they'd dragged him in like a trophy. The prosecutor's words cut through the silence like a blade. A man like this, trained to kill, shouldn't walk our streets. Not a shred of evidence had been presented, not a single witness called. But already the room had passed judgment. Travis was a war machine, not a man, a threat, not a veteran. In that courtroom, justice felt more like theater, and he was the villain of a play written before the curtain even rose. He didn't speak. No one cared to hear from the quiet sniper with haunted eyes and scars that didn't show on his skin. Then the doors opened. The room turned. The judge paused. A tall figure in dress blues stepped in, stars on his shoulders, medals across his chest, and a gaze that silenced even the smirking cops. General Marcus Ellison had arrived. And just like that, everything shifted. Travis Cole lived on the edge of nowhere. A rusted-out trailer parked a good 20 minutes outside Amarillo, Texas. His neighbors were scrub brush, coyotes, and the occasional tumbleweed. He'd liked it that way. Out here, no one asked questions. No one looked at him like he was about to snap. No one cared that he kept his windows covered or that he ran at 4 a.m. every morning like clockwork. At the local gas station, folks knew him only as that Marine guy. The one who barely spoke and always paid in cash. His boots were polished even when his jeans were frayed. His eyes rarely met anyone else's, but those who dared to glance into them saw something unsettling. A 1,000-yard stare honed under Middle Eastern skies, the kind that didn't belong in a quiet Texas town. He had served 3 tours in Iraq, most of it in the city of Fallujah, a place his therapist once described as hell with concrete walls. Travis never responded to that comment. What was there to say? She hadn't smelled the dust or heard the muffled cries after an IED. She hadn't counted breaths while aiming at silhouettes that could be carrying a rifle or a child. In Fallujah, you stopped making distinctions. Since returning, sleep came. Rarely. When it did, it was crowded with things he couldn't name. So he kept busy, repaired fences that didn't need fixing, gleaned weapons he hadn't fired in years, built shelves for books he never read, anything to keep the silence from speaking too loud. But even in his solitude, the world hadn't forgotten him. Or maybe it just didn't care to remember him. Rightly, a shadow had started to grow, not from his past, but from the people around him. Whispers that he was off, unstable, dangerous. And while Travis kept his distance, trouble had a way of finding men like him, even out here in the middle of nowhere. And one day, it did. It started with a siren. Travis was sitting on the porch sharpening a hunting knife when the sound echoed. Across the plains, red and blue lights painted the horizon, too close for comfort. He stood instinctively, shoulders squared, jaw set, watching as 2 sheriff's cruisers sped down the dusty road and parked just a few lots away, in front of a double-wide owned by a woman named Deborah Mays. Deborah was the kind of neighbor Travis avoided, late 40s, loud voice, always watching through slits in her curtains. She'd made it clear from day one that she didn't trust him, called him intense, said he gave her dog anxiety. She'd once asked if he slept with a loaded gun under his pillow. He didn't answer. That was enough for her. That afternoon, her teenage son had taken her car without permission, gotten into an altercation with a rookie deputy at a liquor store, and fled the scene. When the cops traced the vehicle back to her property, she panicked, not for her son, but for what the incident might say about her. In her fear and confusion, she pointed the finger elsewhere. "I saw Travis Cole near the car earlier," she told the deputy. "He's ex-military, unstable. He's always up to something." She added with a dramatic whisper, "He owns guns." The officers didn't ask for more. A veteran loner with PTSD living just down the road, it fit the profile they feared most. Within the hour, deputies knocked on Travis's door. Though knock would be generous, they pounded, shouted commands, treated his refusal to immediately open up as a threat, and when he finally stepped out, calm and unarmed, they still cuffed him. "You match the description," one said, pushing his head down into the cruiser, "and you've got a history." Travis didn't reply. He'd been silent in worse places, but something in his chest cracked, not from fear, from the aching recognition that his service no longer shielded him. It marked him. As the cruiser pulled away, Deborah stood at her window, arms folded, nodding like justice had been served. The ride to the station was quiet, not because there was peace, but because there was no room for words. Travis stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as the cruiser bounced over potholes and dust kicked up like smoke in the rearview mirror. The two deputies said nothing to him. They just exchanged the occasional smirk, like they'd already decided what kind of man sat in their back seat. At booking, they didn't ask questions. They barked orders. Shoes off, hands on the wall, face forward. He complied with the efficiency of a Marine who'd taken worse commands in worse places. But there was no mistaking the contempt in their eyes. The way one deputy muttered, "Freaking Rambo," under his breath when they found a pocket knife in his sock drawer. The sergeant on duty, a stout man with a faded badge and a permanent scowl, didn't bother reading Travis his rights until the paperwork was nearly finished. He stared at the file in front of him and scoffed. "Sniper, huh? That's supposed to scare me?" Travis didn't answer. He hadn't been given the chance to deny anything, hadn't been asked where he was or what he saw. All they had was a neighbor's word and a bias wrapped in red, white, and blue. A fear of trained men with silent eyes and spotless records. They put him in a holding cell next to a teenager shaking from withdrawal and an older man mumbling to himself. There was no phone call, no explanation, just a thin blanket, a metal bench, and the sound of his own breath. Hours passed like days. Travis replayed the arrest again and again in his mind, trying to find the moment it all went wrong. But there was nothing to analyze. It hadn't gone wrong. It had never had a chance to go right. He was guilty by presence, by profile, by silence. And as the steel door clanked shut, he realized something bone deep. No one was coming for him. Not yet. They brought him to court in chains, not just handcuffs, full restraints, ankles, waist, as if he were a flight risk or worse, a danger to everyone in the room. Travis Cole shuffled into the courthouse in silence, orange jumpsuit scraping against his boots. He scanned the room, but no familiar faces met his gaze. No family, no friends, just strangers with squinting eyes and crossed arms, already deciding what kind of man he was. His court-appointed attorney was late. When she did arrive, she didn't look at him, just mumbled a rushed introduction and flipped through a thin folder as if it held anything worth knowing. "I'll try to get you a deal," she whispered, as if that were kindness. The judge, stern, gray, impatient, glanced over the paperwork with disinterest. "Mr. Cole," he said, barely concealing a sigh, "you've been accused of evading police and assaulting an officer. The state recommends no bail, citing your military background as a potential threat." That was it. No mention of an investigation, no review of security footage, no witness testimony, just assumptions dressed up as strategy. The prosecutor stood tall, oozing confidence. "This is a trained killer, Your Honor. He's lived off the grid for years. His own neighbors fear him, and now we're supposed to believe he's innocent? That he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time?" He turned to the jury box, though no jury had yet been called. "We can't afford to take chances." Travis tried to speak, to at least correct the timeline, but his attorney touched his arm and shook her head. "Don't make it worse," she whispered. And so he stayed silent, like he'd learned to be in war zones where silence meant survival. But here, in this room, silence was a weapon used against him. Every second he didn't speak, they twisted. As proof, when the judge ruled to deny bail, Travis didn't flinch. He'd expected it. But in the back of the courtroom, someone did flinch. A man in uniform, clean-cut, watching with a frown that deepened with every word. But Travis didn't see him. Not yet. The cell was cold, but Travis had known worse. He'd slept in desert. Holes under mortar fire, used Kevlar as a pillow. This was different, though. This was controlled cold, the kind that crept under your skin because it knew you couldn't escape it. Nights blurred into days under buzzing fluorescent lights, and the distant echoes of yelling down the corridor. But Travis wasn't built to sit and rot. On the third day, he asked the guard for paper and a pen. The man grunted, tossed him a pad with bent corners and a pen too short for comfort. That night, Travis wrote 3 letters, one to Alvarez, who'd pulled him out of a firefight in Fallujah, one to Mason, who still owed him a beer and a favor, and one to General Marcus Ellison, his former commanding officer, a man who didn't tolerate mistakes and never abandoned his own. He didn't write long, dramatic pleas, just facts. What had happened, where he was, what he needed. "I don't know if they'll listen," he wrote in Ellison's letter, "but maybe they'll listen to you." The next morning he folded them neatly, slid them into envelopes, and handed them to the guard, who shrugged and said, "We'll get these in the mail." But they never made it. The guard tossed them in a drawer, then into the trash by the end of the shift. He didn't like the idea of outside interference, especially not from someone high-ranking who might ask too many questions. As far as he was concerned, this Marine had snapped, like they all did eventually, and deserved to be handled quietly. Back in his cell, Travis waited. For days, then weeks. Every time a name was called for mail, he listened. Nothing. He figured maybe his brothers were busy, or worse. Maybe they didn't believe him either. But someone had noticed. Someone had heard the arrest on the news and didn't buy the story. A familiar name had crossed a retired general's desk, and a memory had been stirred. Ellison wasn't done yet. The trial had barely begun, but the tone was already set, cold, clinical, and stacked. The prosecutor moved fast, confident the jury didn't need much convincing. He didn't present new evidence. Instead, he leaned on performance, insinuation, and the subtle power of fear. On the second day, he approached the bench holding a small, scratched box. "Your Honor," he said, "the prosecution would like to enter this item into evidence, a military commendation found in the defendant's trailer at the time of arrest." The judge glanced at it, uninterested. "Proceed." He opened the box and lifted the contents carefully, as if it might explode. It was a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Not rare, but not handed out lightly. It was earned. This one bore Travis's name. This, the prosecutor said, holding the medal between 2 fingers, was awarded for confirmed sniper kills during combat operations. The citation mentions precision, decisiveness, and the elimination of multiple threats in high-pressure environments. He turned to the jury, eyes narrowing. Now imagine a man like that, trained, efficient, praised for lethal execution, angry, isolated, and off his leash, living just outside your town. Do you really think the events that brought him here were just a misunderstanding? Travis didn't move, but the corner of his mouth tightened. That medal wasn't about killing. It was about saving his team under impossible fire. It was a moment of life or death decision-making that haunted him to this day. And now it was a prop in a courtroom drama that twisted valor into volatility. His lawyer objected weakly. Irrelevant. He's not on trial for his military record. The judge allowed it. It speaks to character, he said. Travis sat back. He understood now. It wasn't about what he did. It was about what people believed a man like him could do. He was being judged not for the crime, but for his potential. But beyond the walls of that courtroom, in a house lined with medals of his own, General Marcus Ellison watched the trial footage online. He saw the medal, heard the words, and stood up from his chair. Some truths he realized didn't speak for themselves. They had to be spoken by those who knew better. The courtroom doors swung open just as the prosecutor launched into another monologue about unpredictable veterans. The interruption was unexpected. Sharp heels, polished shoes, and the click of authority slicing through silence. Heads turned. Even the judge looked up. In walked General Marcus Ellison. His presence filled the room before he said a word. Dress blues pressed to perfection, ribbons and medals gleaming under fluorescent lights, posture straight as steel. He didn't need to announce himself. Half the jury recognized him from news coverage or VA fundraisers. The rest simply knew instinctively. This was someone you listened to. The prosecutor blinked, flustered. "Your Honor, we weren't..." The judge cut him off. "General Ellison, what brings you to my courtroom?" "I'm here to testify on behalf of Sergeant Travis Cole," the general said. His voice was calm but heavy, the kind that silenced every whisper. "And I have documentation and first-hand knowledge that casts serious doubt on the prosecution's case." The judge motioned him forward. For the first time in days, Travis looked up, really looked, his eyes locked with the general's. And for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, respect, hope. Ellison stepped up to the stand. When asked how he knew the defendant, he didn't hesitate. Travis Cole saved the lives of 6 men during a mission in Fallujah. The situation was compromised. Command had called it off. But Cole refused to abandon his unit. He went back, alone, and got them out. At great personal risk. That's why he has that medal, the prosecutor objected. That's not relevant to the crime in question. But Ellison wasn't done. "I think it's very relevant, because you've built your entire case around the idea that this man is dangerous, simply because he was trained to be. That medal you paraded yesterday, it's not a trophy. It's a weight he's carried every day since. And twisting it into a symbol of threat is not just dishonest, it's un-American." The room went still. For the first time since his arrest, Travis wasn't invisible. He was human again, and the story was far from over. General Ellison stayed on the stand longer than anyone expected. What began as a character reference turned into a layered, emotional account of what had really happened in Fallujah and what had happened to Travis Cole afterward. Cole was the quiet one, Ellison said. Never loud, never reckless. He didn't shoot unless there was no other option, but when the time came to act, he did it without hesitation. That's the difference between a soldier and a killer. He described the mission no one in the courtroom had heard of. The night everything went wrong, enemy intel had intercepted their route. An ambush trapped the platoon. Communications went dark. Men were bleeding out in the sand, surrounded. The extraction order was called off, but Travis didn't leave. He found an alternate route through a bombed-out drainage channel, crawled for over a mile in complete darkness, and reached the trapped men. He took out enemy positions silently, one by one, and signaled the others to move. Every man made it back, except Travis. He'd been hit in the leg, and no one knew until later because he didn't mention it. He was too busy watching. "They're 6. Ellison paused, then looked directly at the judge. After that night, he changed. Not in the way most people think. He didn't become violent. He became quiet, withdrawn. But that was never a sign of danger. It was a sign of what he carried. I tried to get him counseling. He didn't want it. Said other guys needed it. More. The courtroom was silent. Even the prosecutor had stopped scribbling. Ellison turned to Travis, speaking now not just for him, but to him. "You should have called me," he said, voice soft. "I did," Travis replied, hoarse. "The letters. They never left." A ripple moved through the gallery. Quiet outrage. Ellison's jaw clenched. The tide had shifted. Travis was no longer just a defendant. He was a brother, a survivor, a protector. And now, finally, the court was listening. For the first time, Travis Cole stood to speak, not because his lawyer asked him to, but because he wanted to. The judge gave a quiet nod. Even the jury leaned in. Gone was the image of the dangerous loner. In its place stood a man who had waited too long to be heard. "I didn't fight for medals," Travis said, voice steady but low. "I fought for the men next to me, and when I came home, I tried to stay out of the way. I never asked for anything, but when they kicked in my door and dragged me here, I realized something. Silence doesn't protect you." He looked to the jury. "I didn't steal that car. I didn't hurt that officer. I've been guilty of a lot of things, nightmares, isolation, pushing people away. But I'm not guilty of what they're accusing me of. And if you believe I am just because I wore a uniform and came home different, then maybe I was right to hide." No one moved for a long moment. Then the defense rested. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreperson's voice cracked slightly as he read the verdict. Not guilty. A breath Travis hadn't realized he was holding left his chest. But it wasn't celebration that followed. It was stillness. He hadn't won a battle. He'd survived another one. After court, General Ellison approached him outside. No cameras, no reporters, just 2 Marines standing under a wide Texas sky. "You're not done, you know," Ellison said. "I know," Travis replied. "But I think I finally know where to start." As they shook hands, Ellison slipped something into his palm, the medal from the trial, cleaned and restored. "It never belonged in the dirt," the general said. Neither did Travis. If this story moved you, take a moment to hit the subscribe button and join our growing community of powerful voices and resilient hearts. Where are you watching from today? And what part of Travis's journey stayed with you the most? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters here.